Welcome back, everybody, to another deep dive. And today we're going to travel back in time a little bit to 1605, to the birth of the very first newspaper.
Okay.
And I know you're a history buff, so this one's going to be right up your alley.
Yeah.
We're diving into some excerpts from a lecture about this groundbreaking moment in history.
Interesting.
And, it's just amazing to think that before 1605, newspapers simply didn't exist.
Wow. Yeah. Can you imagine?
Can you imagine a world without them?
It's really hard to fathom, right? Like
Yeah.
no headlines, no in-depth reporting.
Right.
How would we even know what was going on in the world?
Makes you realize how much we rely on newspapers and news in general in our daily lives.
Totally.
Back then, getting reliable information was a whole different story.
Oh, absolutely. To understand how newspapers came to be, we need to go back even further.
Okay.
To Gutenberg and the invention of the printing press in the 15th century.
Right.
Without that key invention, newspapers wouldn't have even been possible. It took a while for the technology to become widespread and efficient, but by the early 1600s,
Okay.
things were in place for something truly revolutionary to happen.
So it's like all the pieces were falling into place.
Yeah.
So 1605, what made this the perfect time for newspapers to emerge?
Well, Europe was going through some major changes. Trade was booming, political alliances were constantly shifting, and powerful centralized states were on the rise. People were hungry for reliable information to navigate this rapidly changing world.
I can see that in a world with so much going on, accurate information would be more valuable than ever.
Totally.
It's almost like the 17th century version of the information age.
Yeah.
So who steps into this chaotic world with this groundbreaking idea?
A printer named Johann Carolus.
Okay.
He is based in Strasbourg, and he decided to try something totally new.
Okay.
He started publishing a regularly printed paper.
Hold on, regularly printed. So before this, how are people getting their news?
Think handwritten newsletters, town criers, things like that. Slow, unreliable, and definitely not reaching a wide audience. Carolus changed the game by publishing weekly.
Wow.
He called his paper Relation aller Fürnemmen und gedenkwürdigen Historien, which basically translates to account of all distinguished and commemorable news.
Wow, try saying that 3 times fast.
Right.
But seriously, Carolus wasn't just sharing gossip.
No.
He was committed to accuracy, using sources and official reports.
Yeah.
Can you imagine getting that kind of news every week back then?
Yeah.
Talk about being ahead of the curve.
He was truly a pioneer. And his impact goes beyond simply delivering the news. These early newspapers became powerful tools for communication and accountability.
Right.
Governments and officials suddenly had their actions open to public scrutiny.
Wow.
People were watching.
That's a huge shift. It makes you wonder, could Carolus have envisioned the impact his little newspaper would have?
It's hard to say.
On the future of journalism and even democracy itself?
Yeah.
It's a legacy that's still felt today.
Yeah.
Do you see any parallels between those early struggles for press freedom
Oh, for sure.
and what we see happening today?
Definitely some interesting parallels to consider, but we'll get into that a bit later.
Okay.
For now, let's delve a little deeper into the world of Johann Carolus.
Okay.
I mentioned that he was committed to accuracy, but he was also a savvy businessman.
Okay.
In fact, he tried to secure exclusive printing rights for his newspaper.
Really? Exclusive rights?
Yeah.
That sounds a lot like what we grapple with today. Copyright laws, intellectual property.
It does.
It's fascinating to see how those concepts were already at play back in the 17th century.
It really highlights how information, even back then, was a valuable commodity.
Right.
But of course, not everyone was thrilled about the rise of newspapers and their power to influence public opinion.
I bet when information starts flowing freely,
Right.
it can make people in power uncomfortable.
Exactly. And governments quickly tried to assert control over this new medium.
Oh.
Censorship and licensing requirements became common ways to try to muzzle the press.
Wow. It's amazing how these early newspapers, even facing censorship, were already challenging those in power.
Yeah.
Make you wonder, how did those in power react to having their actions scrutinized in print?
Not, well, a lot of the time. But that tension between control and the free flow of information is something that's always been a part of the history of journalism. As newspapers evolved, this tension only intensified. And perhaps no period highlights that more clearly than the 18th century.
Ah, the 18th century, the age of revolutions.
Exactly.
It's hard to imagine a time of more dramatic upheaval and change.
Yeah.
I bet newspapers had a front row seat to it all.
Absolutely. Think about the American Revolution.
Okay.
It was a revolution fueled by ideas, liberty, self-determination, representation.
Right.
And newspapers became the platform for spreading those ideas, mobilizing public support. They were central to the entire movement.
So they weren't just reporting on the revolution. They were actively helping to shape it.
They provided a forum for debate, disseminated pamphlets, and helped to unify the colonies against British rule.
Wow. It's really powerful to think about how something as seemingly simple as a printed sheet of paper
Right.
could have such a profound impact on the course of history.
It really speaks to the power of information and its ability to inspire and mobilize people.
But revolutions aren't exactly known for calm and measured discourse.
No.
Things must have gotten pretty heated in the press, right?
Oh, absolutely. Newspaper wars were common during that era.
Oh, wow.
Rival publications attacking each other, often in very personal and inflammatory terms.
It sounds a bit like the early days of social media.
Yeah.
Everyone battling it out in print.
There are definitely some similarities there.
Yeah.
But whether it was through fiery rhetoric or reasoned debate, one thing is clear: newspapers had become a vital part in the political landscape.
Okay.
They helped shape public opinion and hold power to account. And as the 18th century progressed, we see another important development:
Okay.
the rise of newspapers as businesses.
That makes sense. As literacy rates rose and printing technology improved, newspapers would have become more affordable and accessible
Right.
to a wider audience.
Exactly. We start to see advertising emerge as a significant revenue source.
Okay.
Different sections and features developing, and even the beginnings of specialized newspapers.
Specialized newspapers.
Yeah.
What kind of specializations are we talking about?
Well, alongside the traditional news, we start to see newspapers focused on business, sports, and even, wait for it, gossip columns.
So even back then, people couldn't resist a little celebrity scandal.
Right.
Some things never change.
It seems we've always been fascinated by the lives of others.
Right.
But jokes aside, this diversification of content shows how newspapers were adapting to meet the changing needs and interests of their readers. It was a sign of a growing and evolving industry.
And I'm guessing this evolution wasn't just limited to content.
No.
What about the technology? Did printing presses get any upgrades during this time?
Definitely. One of the most significant innovations was the invention of the steam-powered printing press in the early 19th century.
Steam-powered.
Yeah,
Wow, that sounds like a major game changer.
it was.
How did that impact the newspaper industry?
It completely revolutionized the printing process.
Okay.
Steam power made it possible to print newspapers much faster and in larger quantities, leading to lower costs and wider distribution.
So it made newspapers even more accessible to the average person. That's huge.
It really was. And that increased accessibility fueled further growth and innovation.
Wow.
We see the rise of mass circulation newspapers, the emergence of newspaper chains, and the beginnings of what we'd recognize as modern journalism.
Now, this is where it starts to feel really familiar.
Right.
We're talking about professional reporters, editors, investigative journalists.
Yeah.
Newspapers aren't just passively reporting information anymore.
No.
They're actively shaping the news agenda, digging deeper, uncovering the truth.
That's a crucial point. The 19th century saw the rise of what we call objective journalism, the idea that reporters should strive to be impartial and report the facts without bias.
It's an ideal that journalists still strive for today, though of course we all know that true objectivity is a complex and often elusive goal.
You're absolutely right. It's an ongoing process, a constant striving for fairness and accuracy.
Right.
But the 19th century laid the groundwork for that ideal. It's the foundation for the role of journalism as we know it today, a watchdog, a pillar of a democratic society.
So from their humble beginnings in 1605, newspapers have become powerful forces shaping public opinion, fueling revolutions, and holding power to account.
Yeah.
But it wasn't always a smooth journey. They faced censorship bias and the constant pressure to adapt to changing technologies.
Right.
It's quite an incredible story, isn't it?
It really is. It speaks to the enduring power of information and the human desire to know what's happening in the world.
Yeah.
And as we'll see in part 3, the story of newspapers is far from over.
Okay.
They faced even more dramatic changes in the 20th century.
I can only imagine radio, television, the internet. Each new technology must have presented its own set of challenges and opportunities.
Exactly. And navigating those changes would require even more innovation and adaptation from the newspaper industry.
It's been quite a journey so far.
It has.
From that very first publication in 1605, all the way to the rise of mass circulation and the birth of modern journalism.
It's amazing how much this industry transformed in just a few centuries. But as we enter the 20th century, things really start to ramp up. Newspapers face a whole new wave of challenges and opportunities
Yeah.
with the arrival of radio, television, and eventually the internet.
I bet that was a whirlwind of a time for newspapers.
Oh, yeah.
The arrival of radio must have been a seismic shift.
It was.
Suddenly, people could get instant news updates without waiting for the next day's paper.
Right.
How did newspapers react to that new form of competition?
Well, you're right. It was a major disruption.
Yeah.
Some saw radio as a threat, but others saw it as a chance to adapt and evolve. Many newspapers responded by focusing on more in-depth reporting analysis and features
Right.
that radio couldn't offer.
Okay.
They dug deeper into stories, providing context and a level of detail that radio simply couldn't match.
It's interesting how new technologies often force industries to innovate and refine their purpose.
Yeah, for sure.
But then came television,
Right.
which must have been an even bigger challenge.
It was.
I imagine seeing actual footage of events unfolding
Oh, yeah.
was a completely different experience for people used to just reading about them.
Absolutely. Television brought news into people's living rooms in a way that was both immediate and visually compelling. It was a game changer. But newspapers once again found ways to adapt.
Okay.
They embraced visual storytelling by incorporating more photographs and graphics.
Okay.
They also focused on local news, something television with its national focus often overlooked.
So they found their niche focusing on the things they could do best.
Yeah.
But then came the internet, a technology unlike any other. Did newspapers see it coming? Were they prepared for the digital revolution and how it would change everything about how we consume and share information?
I think it's fair to say that many newspapers were slow to grasp the full impact of the internet. Initially, they saw it as just another platform to distribute their existing content. They didn't fully anticipate how profoundly the internet would reshape the media landscape.
This period of transition must have been incredibly challenging for established newspapers.
It was.
How did they navigate the uncertainties of the digital landscape, especially with the rise of citizen journalism and social media?
It was a time of immense experimentation.
Right.
Some newspapers embraced the digital world wholeheartedly, going fully online.
Okay.
Others adopted hybrid models, maintaining their print editions while building a presence online.
Yeah.
They had to figure out new ways to monetize content, engage with readers on social media, and compete in a 247 news cycle.
It sounds like a wild ride.
It was a challenging time.
But in the midst of all this change and adaptation, did newspapers manage to stay true to their core mission, informing the public, holding power to account, providing a platform for diverse voices?
That's the key question, isn't it?
It is.
And the answer is complex. The internet created both incredible opportunities and serious challenges for journalism.
Right.
On the one hand, it allowed newspapers to reach a global audience and share information with unprecedented speed and reach.
Right.
But it also led to the rise of misinformation and the decline of traditional revenue models that supported quality journalism.
So it's a bit of a double-edged sword.
It is.
Where does that leave newspapers today?
Yeah.
What's the future of this centuries-old medium in our increasingly digital world?
That's the million-dollar question. I think newspapers are at a crossroads.
Yeah.
To thrive, they need to find creative ways to leverage the power of the internet,
Right.
while staying true to the principles of good journalism, accuracy, fairness, in-depth reporting.
Okay.
They need to keep innovating, experimenting, and connecting with readers in meaningful ways. It's a tough challenge, but I believe in the power of journalism.
It sounds like the same spirit of innovation that drove Johann Carolus back in 1605 is more important than ever.
Absolutely. We need reliable, fact-based journalism more than ever. In this age of information overload,
Right.
newspapers have a rich history and a vital role to play in helping us understand the complexities of the world.
Well said. As we wrap up this deep dive, I'm left with a sense of awe at how far newspapers have come.
Yeah.
From a single publication in Strasbourg to the global media landscape we know today. It's been quite a journey, and it makes you think, knowing how profoundly information has shaped our history.
Yeah.
What role will we each play in ensuring that it's used to promote truth, understanding, and progress in the years to come?
It's a good question.
Food for thought, right?
It certainly is. The power of information is immense, and it's up to all of us to use it wisely.
That's a perfect note to end on. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into the fascinating world of newspapers.